Hello, stars. This is Center Stars channel, Chris Baird, and I'm here today. And this is perfect timing. I just had a video I talked to you guys about existence, and I thought, what better way to incorporate this than to talk to somebody who deals with existence on another level, in the paranormal level, and what I consider to be the fourth dimension, the spirit energy realm. And so it's good to get some outside perspectives. So I talked to my friend Alex Bobulinski
Hey,
with
what's up?
Spectral Wolfpack Paranormal and Bigfoot Bob, and asked him if he'd be willing to do a collaboration. So this is that collaboration. And today we do have Alex Bobulinski from Spectral Wolfpack Paranormal and Bigfoot Bob with us. How are you doing?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Uh, Excited to chat.
So, yeah, I'm really excited to have you on too. We've been trying to do this for a while, so it's awesome to finally get there. And it's great timing with the channel and where everything is.
Yeah.
So, let's start out with, I did mention your channels, but if you want to talk about any of your channels again and your Facebook groups, any ways to get a hold of you. Oh, and also your show that you host,
Yeah.
all of those things.
Yeah, so I run the Spectral Wolfpack Paranormal YouTube and Facebook. I also have Instagram and Twitter. Twitter is Spectral Wolves, and Instagram is Spectral Wolfpack Squad. Um, but if you search for Spectral Wolfpack on Google, you can find all my pages. I also run the Bigfoot Bob YouTube channel, which is my Bigfoot content. And then I do the Spectral Wolfpack show every Wednesday night. And that's on the Spreaker. If you search for the Spectral Wolfpack show, you should be able to find it. And that's where I have different guests come on, talk about various topics in the cryptozoology, paranormal. We even have gotten into UFOs a little bit and some other topics as well. So pretty much all those pages.
Nice. And I was actually a guest on Spectral Wolfpack Paranormal show on Spreaker App. I believe it's videos 4 and 5 or 3 and 4 on there
Yeah.
right now for anybody that wants to go catch up on any show. There's no fee at this time to go back and either view or download any of the past shows or listen to them in whole. And so that's something you can do. I'd like to point out as a viewer of Alex's that on Bigfoot Bob, he sticks right to the research, definitely on Bigfoot and any information that he gets on that. Whereas in Spectral Wolfpack Paranormal is a broad range of topics, including cryptids of various types. And also to my viewers, we did do a collaboration, and I saw a Thunderbird a few years back. So for an exclusive on that, do tune into the links in the description. Go over to both Spectral Wolfpack Paranormal and Bigfoot Bob. Watch both of those collaborations. I will have links to his channels and to those two interviews. Those are exclusives over there on that side, both with my Bigfoot encounters and the Thunderbird, two different interviews on both channels. So um, I guess, what we were talking about in this last video here on my channel was existence in the different dimensions, which can get rather confusing.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between the 3D world, the elevation of spiritual dimensions, and then also existence dimensions. And that's where the paranormal seems to kick in. So, most people, when you hear paranormal, they either laugh it up, or they hear about it, but they really don't know much about it and how much it's developed over the past few years with technology.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about paranormal research and the equipment used and how far it's come?
Yeah, and first off, I'd like to say I've came across some people too that might laugh about it, but once you start talking to them a little bit deeper, uh, they some of them are actually afraid to even they don't like to think about it at all, so they kind of maybe make it into a joke in their own mind, but they do fear it, and they do fear the unknown aspects of that. Also,
I agree. The whole in the closet,
yeah,
when something funky happens, they dismiss it in their home, but rub their heads. But would they talk about it with a friend? No, because they're also that type of person that would laugh about it. So yeah, it's good to actually branch out and talk to other people. Have you had this? And you'll find out that a lot of people have had these experiences.
yeah, definitely. And some people are afraid to talk about their experiences too because they've been ridiculed by others. I come across that a lot in both cryptozoology world and the paranormal. People are almost like afraid to talk about it, and I've even had some people back out because they just seemed kind of like they didn't want to talk about it for that reason. Also, I apologize if the dogs are making noise outside. I hope the mic's not picking that up, but
Yeah, for anybody that listens, that's just a regular occurrence. They have to be part of the stream anytime Alex is live or lives. They are audio hounds, camera hounds. They're
yeah.
hounds.
But as far as the equipment, we've came a long way since, back in the day, like we were talking about earlier before the stream, people doing seances, spirit board, and then on to the early years of like when flash photography started coming out, people were trying to use that. And then of course onwards to tape recorders and video cameras. And nowadays, one of my friends and followers, Prehistoric Matt, said something that I thought was cool and that made a lot of sense. He said, "We sure are in the age of audio necromancy," and I thought that was an interesting way to put it, because nowadays we are using we do what we refer to as ITC research, which is instrumental transcommunication, which is using devices such as radios to communicate with something that we get these intelligent responses or relevant responses back sometimes. And we use radios that have been hacked. They call it hacked. It's basically just removing the mute function so that it can scan through all the stations freely and out loud. And you get a mix of all these different frequencies, radio, some radio fragments, and then of course white noise and static. And it kind of creates this environment where something can speak back to us, is what we believe. And we have a lot of evidence that we've been working on collecting, over doing all these sessions and everything.
I can attest to that. At first, I was very skeptical about just tuners in general.
Yeah.
And I wasn't hearing because my mind was closed. But what you'll hear very clear radio announcement blips. But in between that, you'll hear messages like help, light, other words, demon, Jesus, names, even full but fragmented sentences, a word in between each glitch, like it knows it has to hit those spots in between.
Yep.
So it's very interesting, and a lot of those responses are on target. And I've also heard my own voice coming back before, which is very interesting. Or voices that are familiar that sound like a family member, and even saying my name. So that was kind of different for me when I started doing this. That I was like, okay, am I hearing myself in another dimension?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and we've talked about that a little bit in the past. I know, not on here, but just me and you talking about alternate reality, us that's coming through the box, or what's going on there. And because I've heard things that sound like my voice as well, and a lot of people have been commenting that recently. Even my follower and friend Lady Death, she got something on her box, and it sounded like it's saying the thing I say at the beginning of some of my videos, like "What's poppin', guys?" or something. It's like in my voice, and it's very strange.
And it's not at a time that you were running a show, so it couldn't be cross-contamination at that moment in time.
Yeah, I don't
The
think
only
so.
remote possibility would be if somebody a block away was maybe playing the video and it somehow picked that up. But then again, it would have to travel through a radio frequency to get there.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's possible, but who knows? And And then I found too, it's interesting that it's rare when I get super direct responses, but they do happen. Like this one time, there's a haunted school called Poasttown Elementary School, and I had just been there a few weeks ago before this, and we were doing a live stream, and I was at my house, and I was doing it with Eric from Epic Paranormal, and he was at his house, and I had my radio, the one I use. I don't have it in here right now. It's the 12587 Shack Hack radio. And I said, if you're here from Poasttown, can you clearly say Poasttown? And then a couple seconds later, you hear this voice come through and say Poasttown on the radio in Alabama, scanning through the stations, you know.
Another thing is, for people that are watching this, sometimes what we hear is not what is heard on their side, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So we may hear a clear response, but in real time, that response didn't come through. But through the recording and the audio coming through what people are hearing, they will pick up these responses. And so a big part of the paranormal community is also the viewers, right? Because they come back in, put in timestamps, help you out in identifying if you miss something, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I always appreciate when people do that, because there is stuff that I'll miss, and then stuff that I'll miss here. And that's why I always put at the beginning, I try to put, like, let me know what you hear, because I want everyone to be a part of the research and put their input in. Another thing is that I've noticed, and a lot of other people notice this too, there will be responses, even sometimes loud, clear responses that we didn't hear real time. So somehow it's picked up on the audio of the camera, but we might not have heard it during the session. And then I've also started to think about sometimes doing live streams and whatnot, when it's playing through people's speakers, like it'll be playing through your speakers or your headphones. Sometimes people will comment stuff they hear that other people don't hear. So then I started wondering about, what if a spirit there is somehow communicating with them through the noise they're hearing, and that other people might not hear that same response. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, or the interpretation of it can be different because they're hoping to hear their name. Yeah. And I've seen where I've heard my name, and somebody else heard it, or I've heard my name, but 3 different people heard their name at the same time. Yeah. And it's like, are we all getting individual messages at the same time? Or is that what they're really hearing? Or is it their hope that they're hearing that? And then other times, everybody's writing the same thing. So I try to look for those when everybody's writing the same thing.
Yeah. That's
responsive, because those are the ones that are sounding for sure. When you have duplicating timestamps. I was pretty amazed. You dropped a video last night. Can you talk about the title of that video? I don't remember the title. On Spectral Wolfpack.
Yeah, I believe it is. Let me see. I know it's from High Hill Church, which is this little abandoned church.
I noticed something in that, and I timestamped it to you, and you verified it too. He was there alone, and he had already turned off of his equipment, was just doing a final scan around the place. I'm just asking some open-air questions, and very brief, but at 5:52 into that video, there was a clear and quick and concise response, 7. And that 7 seems to follow you from place to place to place to place. And many paranormal researchers have brought that up. We don't want to give too much attention to 7, but it seems to show up in a lot of places, but not all places. It seems to be within your group and unit. I've watched some other paranormal streamers. I just don't see that coming through, but it does with you guys a lot. Yeah. So do you think that there's a spirit, a demon, or a multi-spirit? Is it 7 beings in one entity? Why is it that you think that it's around you in your group and clique more? And why does it seem to just be so persistent, even going to the level of actually having a solid sounding voice come through in an audible range that we can hear it, because that is an extreme amount of energy.
Yeah.
In my view, to trans-dimensionally cross paths and put that voice out in the third dimension.
Yeah, definitely, because it's very rare when you capture things like that. I filmed for probably about an hour, and then catch just that small few seconds of that voice. So it's definitely, I would think it would take a lot of energy to be able to do that, or I don't really understand how it would be able to do that if it is, like you said, it's trans-dimensional. But so the whole 7 thing, it's been a confusing and long little ride here trying to figure it all out. We've gotten lots of different leads on it. The first time I heard about it was when a medium here in Birmingham kind of told me about the Technician 7, and technicians are said to be possibly humans on the other side that are kind of doing the same thing we are, but over there trying to figure out ways to communicate with the living. And there's different technicians people use, but they basically call out to them and ask them to help bridge the gap, and then usually the sessions will be very interesting. The first time I asked for 7, a few seconds later a voice came through and clearly said 7, and so that was the first time I heard about it. The next time I heard about it, we were at a location called Revenant Acres in Indiana. And at Revenant Acres, there has been, I believe, 2 documented possessions, and one of them there's video footage of. And we didn't realize it until after we had investigated, or about in the middle of investigating, that the entity there that was said to possess people calls itself 7 as well. And you can clearly hear in the possession video the man saying, he says, "I'm 7," and then he says, "We're 7," which goes into the multiple entity theory that there might be multiple entities making up this one thing that calls itself 7. We aren't for sure, though. We've gotten stuff about old German and evil Nazis when asking about 7. And then we've gotten, when I saw this red light in the woods, the time I was doing an overnight camping stream, I saw it at the top of the tree line. It was like this red light, and then it just disappeared. And I asked what was the red light, and it said, "I am 7." So it's hard for me to say exactly what it is, but it happens so much that it's definitely not a coincidence to me. And if you listen to the sessions, you will hear a lot about 7 coming through.
Well, I don't think it's coincidence either. And you brought up something very interesting. I had been turned on to this book some years back. It was by Dick Sutphin, I believe. It's called "We Were Born Again to Be Together." It was about past life regression, people coming in for counseling, going through a hypnosis session to delve into them during these phases, going into past lives. And a lot of them were able to find out that, yes, we had been together in a past life. And the reason we fight so much is because, or I'm afraid of heights, is because you let go of me on a bridge, you weren't able to hold on and I fell, or different things like that. But also during these sessions, he said the oldest life he had gotten back to at that time in the 1970s was usually Atlantis or Lemuria, or the Great Flood. Mm-hmm. And also sometimes, though, he bridged beyond that. And during this beyond that in people's lives, he would catch glimpses of what was known as the operators, or the technicians, who pre-programmed your next life and incarnation. And that goes back to my video of the "We Are Infinite," and we may be getting static and bored with that. So then we enter into these constructs of reality as a vacation from that infiniteness. And that there may be these technicians that help us program in. Yeah. What is it that we want to experience? Where is it that we want to go? People that are higher up in the dimensions, stepping down into these dimensions to go help out in these constructs and straighten things out. Mm-hmm. So much. But I noticed, and where I'm getting with this is recently there's been a lot of this Ed too. And Ed announces himself as a communications technician, and sometimes he'll throw in a ditty of music. And for people to understand, on these gateways and on these tuners, it's very rare to hear just a little bit of music.
Yeah.
But when you hear somebody named Ed saying, "I'm here," and then suddenly, a full 30-second ditty of some music goes by, that doesn't usually happen unless a tuner or something jams on a frequency, and quickly people change that. But when it's in real time, the thing's still spinning through frequencies and you're getting music, that means that is a sent message of music, something communicating through that frequency change.
I've even had voices come through and over the music and use it to talk too. It's pretty interesting. But
yeah, it's that whole so people understand about frequencies. You have different radio frequencies. So when they're using a tuner, they're going, what is it? The high 80s through the 107s on just an FM frequency, and et cetera on AM frequencies. But some of this equipment goes through a broad range of external frequencies that could start at 0 and work their way up from there, correct?
Yeah, and people are working on different radios that can scan a wider range of frequencies, because the 587 that I use, when it scans through the stations, it scans 2 stations at a time on the odd stations. One of the next boxes I'm going to get, it's actually going to scan through more stations and frequencies, using a wider range of the hertz there. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, and then I can hear the puppies in the background. I think you're going, "Come on, dogs, come on."
Yeah,
but it's okay. You already forewarned me, so I'm not.
I'm working on
bothered by it all. Even if you are, I bet you're like, "Shut up, dog."
They do it every time I record, and I swear I'll be not recording and they won't make a sound. And I'm working on soundproofing the room because I do a lot of shows in here, and it's frustrating.
Yeah. It is what it is, man. We'll just roll with the punches. Yeah. So can you talk to us a little bit about the visual side of equipment?
Yeah.
And the newer technology that came out with actually being able to see things. And have you seen things?
Yeah, I mean, we have, of course, in our cameras, we have our infrared camera, and then we have our full spectrum camera, and then, of course, your regular normal view camera. And the full spectrum is light that covers the electromagnetic spectrum from infrared to near ultraviolet. So it's pretty cool. We've actually caught a lot of interesting anomalies using full spectrum, and as well as using the infrared. But also we have, Eric has been using the SLS camera a lot, which uses a infrared light sensor as well. And it kind of
just so y'all know, when he says Eric, we're talking about a friend of Alex's and a friend of mine who is on Epic Paranormal TV.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of collaborations with Alex, just so you guys know if you guys want to check him out.
Yeah, and the SLS is the structured light sensor camera, is what they call it. It uses a Kinect cam from an Xbox 360 and shoots out these infrared lights, and with that it uses that to detect any motion in the area, and they have programs now to where it will map a figure using the Kinect sensor. So like, for instance, if you were playing a video game, that's how it would pick your movement up, using that sensor. So they've designed it now to where it can just view the area, the camera can view where you're looking at, and my God, that's the dogs hitting this tin fence that my neighbors had. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
But
just hang in there. Try not to get distracted. I'm doing okay, but I can hear how loud they're being extra obnoxious.
That was loud. That was one of the loudest I've heard in a while. But anyway,
Yeah.
so the camera's looking at whatever you're looking at, or whatever you have it pointed at, rather, and sending out those infrared lights. And if it detects movement, it will map a stick figure to whatever it sees. So, like, if I'm walking in front of it, it's going to map a stick figure around me. It also some of the programs will map a colored outline around whatever it's mapping. So it'll try to map your body shape as well as the stick figure.
I've seen this too, and you know what's interesting is when you guys first started out, even the technology in that is being fine-tuned and refined by Eric himself. When I first got with you guys, it was mapping a lot of things besides blank walls, and it would do chairs, refrigerators, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But now it is very fine-tuned, and it's very hard to get maps, and yet maps do occur, and they show up in blank wall spaces. They show up where there is no like figure, and more, like when you guys go, you talked about Poasttown in the doll room, for instance. It may have mapped most of those dolls in the past, but now you're lucky to get a mapping of any of the dolls. When you do, they sometimes jump out of the doll, walk around, shoot up like really, really tall, and then disappear. And I saw one the other day that was I don't know if you saw that, but I think it was on one Eric's stream. It was like 26 feet tall at least.
Yeah.
A giant in the gym or something. It was just, it started out as two, and they got together, and they were just huge. And that brings to mind, was it Thornhaven Manor or one of those places where you had an experience with something that tried to get into you, and then it end up coming out, and then it was in a map, and then it really grew and shot up through the roof or something, or it was all defunct on the floor after you guys booted it out.
Yeah, and then it stood up.
Can you talk more about that, like what it feels like to have something try to mess with you, and why also maybe speak to the safety of not trying to repeat what you guys do without training, because I see so many amateurs watching you guys and then jumping in and then going, I have a problem now.
Yeah, you have to be careful, because there's a dark side to the paranormal, definitely. And when you do feel something like that, it's intense. Like what I was feeling that night when something jumped me, and things don't jump me too often, I try to be smart about protecting myself and everything. And this night we had done this special frequency opening seance type thing with our radios. Eric did a intention speech about opening the frequencies, and he even said in the speech, he said, which I usually don't offer this up, but he did say that the spirits could use our energy during that.
And one of the things was like this thing had jumped you just prior to that too, so it was like already, it didn't even wait for permission. It just went right after you.
Because I had already
I believe in that room before, like where the wheelchairs were. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just trying to refresh you a little bit from what I saw.
And what's interesting about the wheelchair, something came up about that the other day. Well, two things. First of all, we weren't sure it was in that room when we first did the initial walkthrough. We have footage of the room, and you can't see it in there, but I'm like holding the camera in this weird way, like kind of too far up, so we really can't say for sure. But it's like Eric and the guy who owned the place were walking through that room, and it's like, where was the wheelchair? But on the second thing was, when I was in the wheelchair, Eric was mapping me out, and it actually was mapping out the same exact color energy that it mapped on me later when I stood in the door and it jumped out. So
see, now that's something people need to know too.
Yeah.
For each and every map, it does pick a new color, or it's supposed to, and there were no maps in between that. So it's not supposed to jump to the same color again, just so people are aware. It may be a blue stick figure for Alex who walks through, then green stick figure for a spirit. Then it goes to a red, and through the different colors as it's assigning. So that's really interesting information. Just wanted people to understand that.
Yeah.
What you're saying.
And another interesting thing about this, like I said, it'll map that color, it'll map the stick figure, but it'll also map the energy behind it. So normally on that model, Normally with people, it'll map the figure of the people. So after the frequency opened and when I started feeling really off, I'm talking like real distant, angry, hatred, just like terrible feelings, gloom, just like horrible. You feel horrible. And I had to like force myself to say something about it because I was starting to feel really weird. I even started hallucinating a little bit. I saw this doll's face change, and it was like I was looking through this weird glass. It was just a very weird feeling, and I had to make it known. So I announced it. That's when I went and stood over in the door, and it's mapping the stick figure on me, and it's mapping the energy of me, like it's just mapping my outline. But you'll see if you watch it that the color starts coming off of me onto the floor, and then it starts going crazy all around me. And that's when Eric was like, "Oh yeah, there's something on you, dude. There's something messing with you." And you could see it like moving and stuff.
My memory and my recollection of that, now this was pretty new into finding you guys. Before, when I first started going into it, I almost did quit because it was a lot of static cams for hours and hours and hours, and it was just finding you guys. Well, what I remember the most about that was that it was the second night, I believe, that I had seen you guys. The first night I was okay. That night, everybody was typing, "I've got bad headaches. I'm not feeling good.
Yeah.
I'm feeling really negative energy." And I don't think there's ever been quite a stream since then. And has it been 6 months maybe that I've known you now?
Yeah.
I don't believe that there's ever been quite a stream when so many people were affected directly or indirectly from a location.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to how negative this thing was.
Yeah, I'll tell you, like, it's hard to put it into perspective. Even it's one of those, like, if you were there, you would have felt what we felt. All I can say is the whole night, the way we describe it is, it felt like we went to this place the night that a bunch of really evil beings were having like a meeting there, and it felt like we walked in on this meeting. That's kind of how we described it. And the things that I felt and my perception changing, it was just insane. Like it's hard to put into words, but that's one thing about that capture on the SLS that's really interesting, because with a false map, it's usually not going to move at all. It's when they start moving on their own and doing things, that's when it's really interesting to me, because there are false maps, you know, like you said, it'll map a chair or something, and you can usually tell because it'll just sit there. These things were moving around. Later on that night, we mapped 4 of them jump up into one, and it looks similar to the one that came out of my body. But yeah.
One of the things that I also want to do is, we've talked about a lot of the negative things and negative impacts that can happen, but what are some of the positive sides to paranormal investigation, and some of the great like memories that you've had where maybe something just really spoke directly and it was pretty clear that it was speaking directly, without using names if you don't want to, but where you witnessed a great paranormal session and somebody walked away with that happy tears?
Yeah, I mean, that's one cool thing about doing the large group investigations, where people can come and kind of watch what we do. Usually people always have a great time and walk away from that having learned a lot and heard a lot of interesting stuff as well. But even those can turn dark, you know, as we've seen in the past. So it's really important. Like, I can't stress enough about protecting yourself, even if you've never had anything happen. But a couple of times, one that I will never forget that was just awesome was when I went to this hospital in Ohio. It's an abandoned hospital called Edwin Shaw, and it's no longer there. It's been demolished. There's been several places I've filmed at that have since been demolished, so I'm just happy I was able to document what I could.
If I interject really quick?
Yeah.
Just so you all know, he mentioned Poasttown, and so did I in rebuttal. Poasttown Elementary is one of these places that is always at risk of being lost. There's a gentleman named Daryl Weissman who runs Poasttown Elementary, and he's always in need of donations. He has some great events coming up for Halloween, or that may have just happened. He works on great rates. If you're looking to do these kind of investigations or you're a trained professional, please consider him. You know, maybe work out a deal with your super chats or something to help get something going there. But it is a wonderful place to investigate, and it is a huge place and very dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy watching it, and I just hope that this reaches some people out there that if you're looking to support a place, there's many that you can, but that's one place that I really feel deserves that kind of financial attention, I guess I should say.
Yeah,
So,
preserving these places is important. When they go abandoned, they get vandalized by people, and uh, just horrible how it's.
that's another thing too is, and I keep interjecting, but also the level of respect at these places. You need to be respectful.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And anytime I see kids or people disrespecting, like I'll go out to these cemeteries and see kids pissing on headstones and stuff, and I'll tell them,
We're knocking them over, stealing them.
yeah, exactly. And I always tell them not to do that. Whether they listen or not, that's on them. But I try. I can't control everyone. I can't control anyone. We all have free will. But anyway, so the time I was talking about, I was at Edwin Shaw Hospital, which has since been demolished. But I was using my spirit box, and I was in this hallway, and I hear it say my name. It says Alex. And I was live streaming on Instagram at the time, I think, and I was like, "Did you guys hear that?" And everyone's like, "Yeah." And then I was like, "It said Alex." And then a couple seconds later, again, it says Alex. And I was like, "It just said it again." And then all of a sudden on the upstairs, you hear like a door slamming. And I tried to debunk the door. It was possible that it was from the wind, but it was hard for me to say. But that's always been one of my favorite moments, because I was in there alone. It was just I do it. Part of me does it for the adrenaline rush I get too when I go places alone. Kind of get addicted to that that feeling of being in there, and the things you'll feel too.
The history, probably, right?
Well, I love the
Just the
history as
smells,
well.
the smells. I can imagine there's a whole lot to it that nobody can experience through the camera.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Learning the history is always awesome. And seeing these places is amazing too. Each one's a little different and has its own little special, little specialties. Like some places have certain rooms where something happened, or certain rooms that have been used for this and that. So that's always awesome. But then the feelings I get, I just call them the vibes I get. Like certain vibes I get in different places, always blow me away, because sometimes it coincides with things happening. Like I'll start feeling like there's a presence there, and then I'll hear something slide across the floor, or I'll get a response on my box. And so there's definitely some things going on, and that's another reason I do this, is to try to document this stuff. And I really enjoy doing that. That's probably one of my favorite things, is seeing what we do get, compiling it in videos and for other people to see, and getting the good response from the community as well. So
I just feel like between you and Eric, you guys are just on the edge of this incredible discovery and breakthrough in communication. With Eric and his tech savvy and everything, I feel like that. It's funny I mentioned smells, but you guys have picked up some communication right at the time that there'll be what do you describe it as, like a sulfur smell or something?
yeah, there's been times where I've had the sulfur, and the weird thing about that is it'll come and go. Like it'll come straight sulfur. At the hospital I was at the other day, the abandoned hospital in Birmingham, Alabama, I smelled the sulfur, and it came in and then it went, which was really strange. And some people relate the sulfur smell to demons, but another interesting.
Oh, you all went to that hospital, and I got to tell you, people talk about just lack of respect. and I'm not going to even venture too much of a guess on what was going on here, but this place just had been spackled in the wrong kind of matter, people. And I can't imagine even trying to investigate there. And you know, it was hard to even watch. It was just like, how can people treat a building this way? You know, it brings to mind what kind of people did that, but I don't want to be judgmental against them, but still, it is a
Yeah.
place. It's a place where people used to go. It's a place where people used to be. It is a historical place. And when you're in there and you're just tagging something just to tag it, think about that, you know.
Yeah.
Think about the next person who's taking it seriously and has to walk in and there's 100 pictures of fallacies on the wall and
Yeah.
spackle fluids and solids, and you know, it just really diminishes not only the physical value but the historical value. There's
Yeah.
one of my favorite places that you go that still has, although what last time you went, one's already been knocked over, but some coffins still in it, believe it or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah,
You
that
know, and
place
it,
is
you got you got to think, what do you think is going to be happening in 6 months around there, Alex? Given the nature of humans and how they treat places with those coffins.
yeah, that is a problem, and I do think that either the coffins will be graffitied on, or more will be knocked over, uh, smashed. People might try to destroy them, um, which is sad too because this place had bodies in it, and the authorities had to remove the bodies because it went neglected for a few years, and then people had been ransacking the graves and opening them up, and they found remains in there still after it had been abandoned.
I mean, you know, that's just really sad. I mean,
Yeah.
people have no respect for the fact that I mean, you have come after, but it's after you've been assured that there is nothing in there. It's not like, okay, with that respect level, would you find yourself breaking into a crypt?
No, I would never do that. Like for instance, with some of the mounds and things I found in the woods, people are always commenting that I should dig them
Oh,
up,
you should dig those up. You should do this and
and I'm
that.
like, I'm
No,
not gonna do it.
no, that's disrespectful. And
I
you
don't.
know, if you get caught doing that, people, you'll end up in some serious trouble, especially if you find native remains.
Yeah, I would never do that, and I would contact the authorities if I ever found a body or anything like that, because there have
Or
been.
one of those mounds disturbed or anything, correct?
Yeah, I would never disturb anything like that. And one thing that's interesting, in the last time I was at the funeral home, one of the words that came through, I believe it was disturbed or something like that. Something that,
So something there was upset that, or at least came across as upset that that coffin had been disturbed or
and
something.
I was in that wing where the bodies were found.
Yeah.
So,
So, you know, for people to understand, this is the last resting place for a lot of entities. Now, when I talked about on my video, there's the idea that spirits, when they cross, they can either stay here, especially they tend to stay here if they have an important message to share with somebody. Because when we hear that more and more frequently, it's Dan, George. It's a question type. It's not like they're just saying names. It's
hmm
like they're really looking for somebody. And then there's those that are kind of in between. They go out in the universe, do their work, or there's the ones that go towards the light. And
yeah,
uh, and then there's those that are in between that want to get the message out, and then they want to get to that light, and that's where these people are stepping in to really try to help those people. When somebody comes along you, and does that, it's kind of goes back to the, would you do that to somebody's face? Would you come to somebody's house and pee on their doorstep,
exactly.
or any of that stuff, or break their front door down? No, but people walk into a graveyard and desecrate a grave, or do some stuff like that, and it's like, to me, that's, if you're in the community and you're doing that kind of stuff, I call that coward paranormal.
Yeah,
So it's just very frowned upon, not funny at all.
yeah, it's really not. And yeah, and many in the community will shun you because if you act like that.
You won't be around the business very long because
No.
nobody's going to associate you with you or have anything to do with you because the people like Alex that are working on this, for my viewers especially, he's there trying to A, document, B,
Hmm.
preserve places, C, bring out history, and D, the ultimate goal is to help somebody cross and get their message across.
Yeah, I'm
You
always
know,
asking if anyone has any messages. One thing too, in a session the other day that was kind of interesting. I asked if they could see me, and I got a word come through. It said blind. So I'm not sure if some of them are stuck in this darkness, like we've talked about before. It's hard to say, but that's why we continue doing this and continue trying to get more answers.
and that's another. I think this is about the last question on the paranormal one I have, unless I think of anything else. But there are obviously darker energies too that choose to stay back and do choose to haunt.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's definitely.
Um,
Oh,
well, my question
yeah.
on
Go
that
ahead.
is should we automatically take it verbatim? Every apparition we see is going to be a negative thing.
No, I definitely think there are many that aren't negative. Like a lot of times, people will call me like on residential cases, and they'll be like, "I'm hearing walking in my house or something." And I'll be like, "Well, has anything done anything bad or anything harmed you?" And they're like, "Well, no, I'm just kind of freaks me out." And I'm like, "Well, and then they'll tell me like maybe their grandmother passed away or and I'm like, "Well, maybe it's her. We don't know for sure, but if nothing bad's happened, then I wouldn't personally be afraid of it." And I want to say this
That was
too.
weird because when you said that, like I got really emotional thinking about that. Not
Yeah,
my grandma per se, but just how maybe they're so misunderstood. I almost brought a tear to my eye thinking about that.
yeah,
How many times we maybe chased something off that wasn't even. It was just trying to just coexist in the space, and
yeah,
who knows
yeah. Maybe it hears your voice or it sees you or is trying to let you know that it's there. Um, and
without scaring you.
yeah, exactly. But then, of course, humans, we hear something and we don't see what's there. It's going to kind of freak us out. Um, and that's been a problem too I've came across is that some people will get so obsessed with that fear and they'll start fearing every little sound. It'll kind of ruin their life in a way. Like they'll be unable to be happy in their own house. And so that's one thing I go around doing with my residential work is that I focus on the cleansing side and trying to help people understand it more and understand that it might not be a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying, and that like kind of hit me like a ton of bricks because I can't think of how many times even before this day that I've seen something and I've immediately thought I need to cleanse the house, I need to get rid of it, but get out of here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And thought now I'm thinking, has it really done anything? Has it done? You don't want to invite a negative energy in your home. You're not
Yeah.
necessarily going to say it, stay, but if something's not hurting you
Mhm.
and not knocking stuff off the shelf every 5 minutes, then maybe it's just there.
Yeah.
And at one time it was their home too, or, they feel a kinship with you and watching your family, it makes them feel comfortable in the place that they're at. And
Yeah.
they're just there to observe. There is one more question I had though, that a most important question.
Yeah.
Do you believe that there are physical people in their third dimension and or beings that can use equipment that can make them appear to be in the fourth dimension? In other words, like cloaking devices,
Yeah.
energy devices that can have them go through walls. Do you have any experience with that? Have you heard of that?
I think that it's definitely would be possible. I'm sure that there is equipment out there like that we don't know about or can even fathom. But there have been times where I thought I saw something that almost looked like something was cloaked, like something will move by and I'll see it, but I won't be able to make out what it is. It'll just be like
You're like, was that a ghost that walked by? Was that a shadow?
yeah. So it definitely
something
makes
just
you
open
wonder.
that wall? Yeah.
Yeah,
I just wondered
I think it's
because I thought
possible.
I saw one of those one time. So
Yeah,
I just thought I'd throw that out
and
there. So,
and people will see like full-bodied humans walk through walls and things like that. So is that a spirit or is that something like that?
well,
Who
that's a
knows?
good segue into your second channel here, because there are some people that claim things like, oh, what is it? The goat man. And
Yeah,
some of these others are cross-dimensional, cryptids that
yeah.
can appear in the third and the fourth dimension. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe this is a great place to just, if unless you had something to wrap up on this on the paranormal side,
Oh,
and if you do, that's fine.
one more thing I'd like to say about what were talking about before the last question. Like in Native American cultures, um, they're all they were very in tune with the spiritual world, and if there was something there they thought was bothering them, they would just tell it, we acknowledge your presence. You can go now. you know, like I've
Oh
had.
yeah, that's a whole nother genre we didn't even get into. It's great that you bring that up. Actually, I mean, gifting to the great spirits,
Yeah,
and
that too.
being in tune with your ancestors and your family members. You have to keep in mind that these natives, they used plants and things that are banned to us now,
Yeah,
that were mind expanding, and we're taught they're mind destroying. But
yeah,
they used them responsibly, regularly, and were able to have out of body experiences like I described in the last video. So, yeah, could you touch on that some more? That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. There's, with those substances and plants and fungus and vines and things that they would use, they believe that they could kind of tap into some kind of spiritual realm, and people have had experiences on those things, supposedly having conversations and experiences with these interdimensional beings and spirits. And
Many, many people have heard about the peyote trip
yeah,
that you do to find out who your spirit animal is. A lot of people don't know that the great Salem witch trials, they found out that there was a mold in that area that was getting in the water and the food supply,
yeah,
and causing people to literally trip during that time and freak out about witches.
yeah, and maybe some of those things could be a a key into tapping into that realm. There's, especially with like
I think we had a minor interruption there, so restart that statement.
I was saying, let's see, what did I say? Well, I was just gonna say that it might be possible to tap into those realms through these things, because especially when we're talking about dealing with these frequencies and things like that, because I've heard stories about people experiencing these frequencies while taking these fungus and while ingesting with this kind of stuff. So it's definitely an interesting topic, and I think that under the right circumstances and the right experiments and tests, it would be interesting to see what kind of results you could get.
Yeah, I wouldn't just go out there and start eating cactus, people. You really
Yeah,
do need to have a spirit guide. You need somebody that's going to take you on that journey if you're going to go there, and it needs
yeah,
to be legal. Obviously, we're not preaching anybody should be doing anything that's outside the realm of the law right now.
yeah, not
Period.
at all. Yeah, it's just interesting to think about, because past cultures did use these things, especially with like medicine men and things like that. They would use that to engage with the spirit world, which is just interesting to think about. And then going into the cryptid stuff too, Native Americans had a lot of legends about that as well. So yeah, if you want to get into that side of
Well,
things, we can.
yeah, and so we're going to move on, not moving on from Alex, but from the Spectral Wolfpack on the paranormal side to the cryptid side, and the other side of Alex that you'll see on Bigfoot Bob. It's a little bit more direct, specifically with Bigfoots or any. Well, you've also done these. We were just touching on it. These offerings. There
Mm-hmm.
are actually trees, people, that are bent at 90-degree angles, and and they have like two stems on them, look like a number 4, and they're like
Yeah,
marker trees.
yeah,
And
and those
You talk to us about marker trees, cryptids, offerings, all those kind of things.
Yeah, so some of the trees are definitely from the Native American eras. They would, bend the trees to mark a trail or mark a water source or anything, just as markers. And some of those trees continued growing, and you will find them. And yeah, some of them are very strange. Like it'll be straight and then a bend, and it'll go for a while, and then it'll go back up, like you said. And so I call those the native trail trees. And that's one place I'll leave like tobacco offerings and things like that. And that's one thing when you start getting into the Bigfoot world, you'll start learning about the tree structures and possible, tree leans and bends and breaks and just random tree limbs appearing places they shouldn't be, things like that. And some people question it and they're like, well, why would, I think that that's just all deadfall, or it's just not, it's not Bigfoot related. But the Native Americans used the trees for things like that. I don't see why the Bigfoot wouldn't, and maybe the Native Americans learned it from the Bigfoot.
Some of the things I'd like to point out about that, we have excuses for some things, like in places like up here in Colorado, like tree bends. We could blame that on the weight of snow.
Mm-hmm.
If it's in the mountains and there's literally like 10, 20 feet of snow, sure.
Yeah.
Trees falling across each other, this and that. But when you're talking about some place like where you live, where it doesn't get that much snow and further south, and these same kind of bends and structures reappear all over the country and all over the world, in fact, then it gets out of the realm of, okay, we can explain that with snow weighting it down, or we have to explain it as something else. Well, natural forces bending certain trees. Why not all of them,
And I've even had, in my one area that I go to the most, I've been, kind of actively researching this one area. I'll find that some of the stuff will disappear and then new stuff will pop up around it. Like there was one very intricate one that is no longer there, and I don't understand what could.
Are you going someplace where just everybody just walks through every day, and man, you see a lot of foot traffic back there, and on any given day you see at least 5 people when you're walking through the woods?
No, I've honestly never seen anyone else back here. It's not near any hiking trails or anything like that. It's not near any popular areas.
I was just playing a devil's advocate. I know that's not the situation, but I have to say that for the viewers.
No, definitely. And it's important to know that because, in a place like that, then sure, maybe someone might be messing around back there. But in this specific area, I've never seen another person out there. There's been times, there's a graveyard, which is how I started going to this area for the paranormal, and then started exploring the woods behind the graveyard. I've seen people go to the graveyard. I've only seen, like in the last, every time I drive by there, there might be a person there taking some pictures because it's like a old historic graveyard, but not many people know about this spot. It's not all over the internet. It's kind of a hidden little treasure, and there's really nothing, no parking lots.
There may be some paranormal investigators going there, the occasional Bigfooter, but to get people to get their minds off of all this stuff is fake, because that's what everybody jumps to. Who's doing this? You think that these guys go out, spend 3 days in advance leaning trees, making X's, making TPs, and then they're like, okay, we're all set, let's go back and film.
I mean,
I laugh about it, but that's the kind of mentality that some people have. So
and I mean, of course anything's possible, but I just don't see it happening, especially in this area. It's just not, it's not like a popular squatch spot or anything like where a bunch of people come all year round. Like maybe you might run into some of that stuff in some of the more popular spots, because there are popular Bigfoot hotspots. Like Salt Fork State Park in Ohio has a ridge that they call Bigfoot Ridge. But there's some stuff I find that I think it would be very hard for a human to do what has happened to these trees, and like the way it's bent and the way it's woven in.
Where the top end is facing up, and the bottom end is leaned right into a tree, but you can't find the lower portion of this tree. The closest thing that looks like it's broken is maybe another 200 yards away.
Yeah.
You would think if a tree broke from the top, it would at least fall down sideways, if not try to topple over head first,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. They do like to put in these blockages that we don't think about. You and I were talking about this and some
Yeah.
hypotheses about this, but when you're walking along a trail and you run into like a 2 or 3 foot tall branch that extends out 40 to 60 yards, and then you get to that one and it has one that goes to the left 40 to 60 yards, you find yourself zigzagging through the forest, not even realizing you are,
Yeah.
almost like you're a predetermined path that somebody's watching.
Yeah, and I've been noticing that too since we talked about that. Just more certain areas will be kind of
Random,
blocked
but it's
off.
not so random. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, and yeah, it's very interesting. The area we were at the other night, I was noticing that when I was out the other night, I noticed just certain things. There would be certain blockages. Like it seems like it's kind of directing you in certain ways. And then with like the things that look like it would be a blind where they could hide behind, and it will be like, it's just like too weird when you see it and when you actually start realizing it and noticing it. And then all the X's, I find a lot of like perfect X's on the ground and in the trees. It's just,
Or freestanding, kind of like don't go too far past this point,
yeah,
or
exactly.
don't come past this point for us.
Yeah, I mean that's what I would assume, that an X, it's kind of a universal, like, do not cross, like. And so
In
it's,
both directions, kind of, yeah, just like maybe a boundary for the youngsters or for us to not be encroaching too much, you know?
yeah, and that's, and everything we talk about too is all theory because no one knows for sure, but
Yeah, we
it's
don't.
definitely interesting to think about and wonder what some of the stuff is for. In some areas, I'll find a lot of things like jammed into the ground, and I've always thought that was interesting. I'm trying to figure out what that would be for. It'll
And
be
we're
like
not talking like just barely sticking to the ground, you touch it, it topples over. We're talking, what,
se-
6 inches,
yeah,
eight
several
inches
inches.
shoved into the ground, pretty good pressure. That unless it's pretty wet out there, you and I aren't going to be able to have that kind of strength, to be honest with you. I mean, you really have to jam a sharp stick to get it an inch in the ground on a dry day. I'm sorry. Go try it,
Yeah,
people.
sometimes
You know,
sometimes I struggle pulling them out, and then I'll pull it out, and there'll be this big hole, and it'll just be like the end of a stick that's been clearly stuck into the ground.
playing the devil's advocate, like them falling from a tree again. Sometimes these things are in clearings.
Yeah,
They're not next to a tree, and it doesn't even match the foliage that's around there. So they're like walking sticks,
and
but like
I've thought of that
territory
too.
markers or something.
Yeah, and I've thought about that too, and it would have to fall awful, like in a certain kind of way, and it might not even pierce the ground because when a stick falls, it might pierce the ground, but some of them too are smaller sticks that have been jammed deep into the ground that would not have weighed enough to go that deep, that I wouldn't think, but
No, no,
who,
I've seen some of the stuff you've pulled, and I've been like, there's just honestly no explanation that I can come up with. A squirrel didn't do that. A deer didn't do that. A moose didn't do that. A human would have a very hard time doing that. And again, where are all the humans at that are out here shoving sticks into the ground?
yeah, it's
Just
just
for the
not,
fun of it.
it's
I
just
mean, I
not
could see him
happening.
making a teepee just for the fun of it because you're out in the woods. But we're we're. I talked to one guy playing the devil's advocate again.
Yeah,
I was just like, you really remind me of Bob Gimlin, this guy. I saw him at the electric place, and he's like, and I said, he's a Bigfoot guy, and he goes, well, just to let you know, a lot of that stuff up there, above tree line never rots. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great information, but even if it's been there 150, 200 years, somebody put it there that way.
yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
there's a lot of stuff I'll find too that I think is, it'll be older wood or it'll be just older. Um, so yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if they've been there, then there's gonna be stuff like that, I
And
think.
what about that? I want to bring this up. Very important. You had a couple weeks ago on Bigfoot Bob an exclusive accidental but amazing capture of some red eye shine.
Yeah.
And right before that, as you were walking through, there was new leafy structures in timbers.
Yeah.
Then you see this eye shine, but you didn't see it live.
No, I didn't.
And then you said something very interesting after that. So if you can recollect that whole video and go through that for us, I think the listeners will be really interested in that. And I may put that link in the description to you people, because I think you just got to see this.
Yeah, so I had, wanted to get out that night and film, and so I hadn't been out in a couple weeks because I had been sick and traveling, doing some conventions and whatnot. So I decided to go out this specific night. Set out, did what I normally do. Some of the stuff I don't include on camera too is that I'll sometimes talk to the forest, and I will, say, hey, it's Alex, and just kind of do like I would do with the spirits as well. Anyway, I left a tobacco offering on a tree, one of the native trees, and I continued walking, and that's when it happened. I didn't see it till I was editing, but my camera picked up on these two red eyes. And directly after the camera picked that up, I mentioned feeling this intensity and kind of feeling this weird feeling. Like I got chills, my hair was standing up on my arms. Normally I get that feeling when there's some kind of presence or something around. So
yeah, that whole somebody just walked over my grave is what most people say.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the old lines, the old saying, somebody just walked over my grave. Whoo, I got chills.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I got that, and then continued walking. Another interesting.
One thing about that too is, and people are just going to love me for this interview, how much I've interrupted you. So hold your thought. Another thing is you get that. I talk about this in the interview with Alex when I talk about the Bigfoot experience I had. When you're around what you perceive to be a predator, even if you don't see it, you will feel it.
Yeah.
Or because in the forest, suddenly everything goes quiet for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, you could hear a pin drop, a mouse fart. I mean, it's that quiet, and that's when you get that feeling. And even though you didn't see it in real time, that thing was very, very close to you.
Yeah, it was, and judging by its eyes and how far apart they are, it was pretty big. Because I did the size comparison, and some people said it even could have been crouched down. So imagine how.
It had to have been, because the eyes are so wide apart compared to what you are in that position.
Yeah.
This thing had to be crouched down at least twice as tall as what it was.
Yeah, it's pretty
crazy.
It's insane. And
it's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome, and that's one of the reasons I do this, is to try and capture these moments on film. And like another thing,
you could go 20 years and never get something like that in your lifetime. I mean,
yeah.
I was decently surprised, but not totally surprised, that you were the talk of the town the next day on most of the Bigfoot places. Were like, look what Bigfoot Bob, and you've got a relatively new channel, and you're like, Bigfoot Bob strikes again, and you know what I mean? They're like, check this out, and it's and it was really, really great to see all that community support in that situation. And this goes back to pretty much this whole talk we've been talking about, having respect for what you do and respecting places.
Yeah.
And also there has to be no joking and poking around, faking anything.
No.
The moment you fake one little iota of anything, okay?
Yeah, I'm
you're
totally
done.
Against that.
And these guys would not risk their reputation on anything. He didn't come out and say, look, guys, I saw a Bigfoot. No. He said, I noticed this eye shine, and, or something that looks like eye shine, these red lights. And even he at first said, I don't understand it, Chris, because they're far apart, but then they get narrowed close together. And I was like, well, Alex, it was turning its head away from you, so they would appear closer together before they disappeared.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But one thing that doesn't make sense, people, is that when you get eye shine, most critters in the forest are white or yellow eye shine. So
Yeah.
you want to talk more about that, maybe?
Yeah, they say that some animals can have a red, like owls, and possibly, I think they said, some people say bears can as well. Um, but whatever this was had a huge head. So if it was an owl, it was a very large owl. And I think, I would have heard. I'm pretty good about hearing when an animal's around me. You can hear it moving, and whatever this was pretty silent. And I've tried brightening it up too to see if I can make out a figure.
And you've been honest about that as well. I want to point that out to people. There are people that have come back and have messed with it and this and that and said that they see something.
Yeah.
And Alex turned around and said, honestly, I'm sorry, I can't back that up. I don't see what you're seeing. I appreciate it, but I don't see it. He's very honest about what he can and cannot see in that situation.
Yeah, and because some people have said they can make out a brow ridge or even the conical head that people say that Bigfoot have,
And that's news to me too.
yeah, and I can't make it out, but and I've tried to brighten it. If we can't see a figure, and it might be even further back than we think.
If there are any listeners out there though,
yeah.
and you have advanced editing software, and you're able to reverse that image and get something out of it,
yeah,
please comment on my video. I respond to all comments, everything. I will put you in touch with Alex if you have any decent findings on that. And I mean decent findings.
Yeah, I'm all for
I'll
that.
look what you got, and if it's good, I'll get it on to Alex for you, no problem whatsoever. I invite you guys to take a look at that video and take a peek at it. Just let us know.
Yeah, I'm all for that. I've some people have been trying to brighten it up, and one guy, he's like I believe he's an eye doctor, and he's interested in the theories about Bigfoot eyes, and even he was blown away by the footage, and he was like, "Can you please show me that this wasn't facing the road so I can just know it's not a tail light?" Yeah. And I showed him, I showed him the map, and he was like, "Okay." He's like,
yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised. And just so you know, he did a camping trip a while back, and man, we're torn in a couple directions. He did this whole night camping thing, and in that, there just seems to be some images of where it does look like almost a feminine, like Bigfoot is looking in your tent. But going through it, Alex said he's very hesitant to go full force with that because it doesn't seem to show up in all the scenes, and even during the time it's there, it seems to come in and out with the camera. So,
yeah,
but wow, that was just amazing too.
Yeah, it's hard to say if it's.
Aren't familiar with Bigfoot at all, so you talk about like samurai chatter and some of the other things.
So Ron Moorhead, he's an investigator, an explorer. He's written several books on the subject, but he back in, I believe, in the 70s, he was out in the Sierra Mountains. Him and his friends would go out there to this little camp, and they would stay for long periods of time. Well, they started having these experiences, and they started bringing their recorders out there, and they recorded all this audio that has been dubbed the Sierra Sounds, which is just different sounds. You'll have they captured some like rock clacking and wood knocks and weird vocalizations. Well, they dubbed one of the vocalizations the samurai chatter because it sounds what people describe like as a samurai talking, but in this weird, deeper, almost like it sounds almost like a primate or some kind of like.
It's kind of, some people have described it as an off dialect native tongue.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it is whispering but yet crisp and concise in a way that they call it samurai chatter, like very, it's just hard to even describe it. But we heard that night. I know we heard it. We were at multiple occasions that night.
And I've got
it on
the audio.
Said, but man.
Yeah, I've got some audio that's very interesting. It has the deeper tone voice, and it has these higher pitched like yelps and weird sounds. It's just
Now, so
very
people aren't
strange.
confused that in some of that audio, Alex was recording on an audio device and also live streaming on another device. So you
Yeah,
can hear his voice in some of that stuff.
yeah.
On the one where he's just listening to the audio, you can hear him talking. But in between that, where he was over there hearing the samurai chatter, you hear the samurai chatter louder by this audio equipment, just so people say, oh, no, that's just him talking.
Yeah, the part with the samurai chatter, and you can watch because I include both the footage of me during the live stream. I'm being very quiet and just listening, and you can hear this like deeper. It's like I can't even
Yeah.
describe what it does. It's very strange,
And
and
it's well heard above. I mean, it was loud with what do you call them things? Acanids or so, whatever the crickets and all.
oh, the cicadas.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those things. So,
yeah, yeah,
well, it was just a very loud night in general, but you could
yeah.
definitely hear things. There was a loud crash that night. When he
Mm-hmm.
was sleeping, we heard it. So it was debunked as far as anybody else doing anything. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
and then I've
I-
heard the samurai chatter the night I was out with the captured the red eyes. I heard it, but my audio didn't pick it up great. But I did hear it, and it was very it's so strange the way it sounds. That's going to be one of my focuses. Is I've got a Tascam, which I can get very sensitive mic input on it, and I can crank it up. Once the bugs die out in the winter, I'm going to be out there a lot trying to capture that on clear audio. So it's going to be pretty amazing.
I do want to let people know that one of the videos I might do is a little bit of um, getting into the mythology or the thoughts about Bigfoots on the channel at some future video. Um, there are some people that believe that Bigfoot works for the Greys, who are an intercrustal species known to the Hopi as the Ant People, and that they're hunters and gatherers on the surface to provide meat substance and things to those in intercrustal Earth. There's others that believe that they themselves are a hominid type race that retired on Earth and lived in harmony with the natives, and or that they are definitely a kinship to humanity and possibly one of the pre-flood attempts to make humans and workers for the Anunnaki and Nephilim. There's so much behind it, and or that they are just a actual species here, and that maybe our DNA was taken from them and used to make us as
Yeah.
those workers. And there's so much to it, people. And to just dismiss that, oh no, it didn't happen. There's some really great interviews out there, even with people. If you look up Washington, was it Mount St. Helens blowing up, and
Mm-hmm.
the government going in and actually having to take a native around to help a Bigfoot locate family members and actually politely put some of them down because they were so severely burnt. And
Yeah.
that them the United States government at the time pleading with the people that did help on these recoveries and relocations they pleaded with them. They said, okay, so now you see they're real, but they want to be left alone. And if you talked about it anyways, nobody's going to believe you. But talk about it in 30 years because everybody will know by then. Well, 30 years has passed
Mm-hmm.
and we're starting to talk about it now. And unfortunately, it hasn't come out yet. But I, I, I feel strongly that the Bigfoot are real from what I have seen with my own eyes, like I discussed on your interview on Bigfoot Bob. The
Yeah.
arm was undeniable. It had to be an arm, unless there's furry snakes, like I said. So you guys check that out.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything else with Bigfoot? I did have a question for you too,
Mm-hmm.
because we kind of skipped right over the Bigfoot side of things, but about the dogman and going back to that and the maybe possible dimensional type beings, that maybe they are able to morph to where we can see them or not. And do you think Bigfoot could be possibly able to stay so well hidden because they are able to do some kind of camouflage or something like that?
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's out of the realm of possibility with these with this stuff. I think I try to stay open minded to all the possibilities. But one thing I wanted to bring up too, back to the Bigfoots and the Greys, just real quick, is that
Well, you have people and all that. Yeah.
in John Keel's book, he in I think it's called a guidebook to mysterious beings, I believe it's called. He talks. There's a story in there about someone seeing a Bigfoot get onto a UFO with two smaller beings.
You know what I thought about the other day?
Yeah.
Chewbacca, man.
Yeah.
Chewbacca. You know, you look at Star Wars, you look at all these critters in there. The Genosian soldiers look like ant people, like the Greys. And like if you look up alien killed in Colombia a few years back, there was like this or witch alien killed in Colombia a few years back. There's this video of this guy just pumping lead into this winged ant-like creature that comes flying out of the forest.
Yeah.
That he thinks is a witch. He's proclaimed witches. His dogs are tearing it up. Everybody called that fake, but there are other films of supposed aliens and stuff like that, and they look like creatures just out of that. And I always try to say, you know, a lot of times we're shown these things in a mythological way that are reality, and yeah, very well could be that they're highly advanced or connected to those that are highly advanced and are very, very spiritual and very coveted beings. And in a way, the more I look into things, it seems like our society is the fake one. And those that lived before in the native cultures, they had it right. They had harmony with their planet and lived in unison with it. Yeah, they still had war and stuff. They had a ways to go before they, you know, there was always going to be bad apples that would go from tribe to tribe trying to steal when they didn't have none instead of asking.
Yeah.
But they lived in harmony with their environment, with the amount of animals. And in our great infinite wisdom, we have regressed into destroying our world and living happy and fat off the land. But that's only going to last so long until we are eventually forced back into more of what we call an archaic state.
Yeah.
Becoming more tribal again. So anyways, I'm sorry, I just got off a little tangent there. I have to apologize about this whole thing. You just talking to you, man, brings up so many original thinking thoughts and other thoughts, because you and I are like on so much of a wavelength when we talk. So I'm sorry.
It's totally fine, man. I think we've covered a lot of awesome stuff, and I enjoy.
I love this one so far. I love it. I think my listeners are going to love hearing what you had to say. And I think it's an excellent kickoff to or a follow up with what I was talking about with that. And so with Bigfoot, we went over the Samurai Chatter. We went over the Red Eye Shine video, the camping video. I would like to know who inspired you in the Bigfoot community, and who would you also suggest that people watch, and maybe in the paranormal too, if you have anybody that you suggest that really inspired you. Any thoughts on
good question. I haven't really thought about that too much, but there's definitely some people that have.
Well, nobody be offended if Alex accidentally leaves you out on this. I put him on the spot, so if you forget your name, please do not take that person. I think he covers anybody he's ever interviewed, number one, or talked to. We'll just add a given. But I mean, I'm talking like childhood. Alex is growing up and he's watching TV. That's what I'm getting at, people.
Definitely, always a lot of people too. The Bob Gimlin and Patterson footage.
Oh yeah. Of course.
That's definitely juicy. Has inspired a lot of people. That of course watching show. Josh Gates, from Destination Truth, and
like unsolved history, mysteries, and stuff, and that.
Well, Josh Gates was on Destination Truth, and he was like one of the first that I really got into. He like goes out and explores these places and tries to find these local legends and things like that. Him and I believe Adam Davies was on his show too, and that's someone who I've met in person. Scott Martis, he's big on lake monster cryptids, but he's a huge influence to me. Seth Breedlove, Small Town Monsters, his documentaries are amazing and it definitely inspires me with what I do. Ron Moorhead, I got to meet him briefly, and I've read his book about the Sierra Sounds. He's a big influence. In the paranormal, recently, Greg and Dana Newkirk, we got to meet them and listen to their speech, and they've influenced me even just since meeting them a few weeks ago.
And all these people you've met, have you ever met one that just said, I belong in a loony bin?
No, I mean, most of the people that I've met are all very level-headed, very intelligent people, and a lot of the people that have sightings are just the same way, normal people. Some of them you would never think they're into this stuff. One of my new friends, Jay, we're both members of the North American Dogman Project for the Alabama chapter, and he's just like this cool dude. You would never expect him to be into this stuff, but he's just as into it as I am, and we actually are planning on doing some stuff in the future. And then my friend Ken Patterson, who taught me a lot about, he's a tracker, and he's just from being around him the several times that I have, he's taught me so much about tracking and about trying to follow these structures and find these areas where these things might be or might hang out at, essentially. And so he's been a huge influence. And my friend Kim Johnston, who, she always lets me come to her paranormal events. She influenced me a lot in the paranormal realm. And I've learned a lot from coming to her events and met some awesome people through them who have taught me invaluable information about investigating.
And I think this has been an awesome interview. And if it gets too lengthy or if we have problems downloading it, we might do this in a 2-part series on my channel, I'm thinking. And that's fine. I love it all. It's been amazing. I do know that you have always a busy schedule, and you're approaching a time right now that you talked to me that you have to be pulled away from me. I can't keep you on for another 2 or 3 hours. So darn, we'll have to have Alex back on the channel sometime. And
anytime we'll do it again.
We've covered so much, and if you guys have any questions at all, please put them in the comments, or just get on his channels, comment to him, give him some likes, give him some love, share his information. And with that, Alex, why don't you give us all that information again, because it's been so long, and I know when I listen to these interviews sometimes I tend to forget. So hit those up again for everybody, please.
So search for Spectral Wolfpack Paranormal. You can find my YouTube, my Facebook, Instagram, which is where I'll post pictures from my adventures and from my investigations. Twitter, I'll just be sharing YouTube videos, but it's Spectral Wolves. And I'm very active on Facebook and YouTube. And then the Spectral Wolfpack Show is my podcast on the Spreaker. If you Google the Spectral Wolfpack Show, you will find it. And that's where I have different guests. Chris was also a guest.
Just that is Spreaker, Spreaker.
Yeah. Yep. And then Bigfoot Bob is my Bigfoot channel. If you search for Bigfoot Bob, you will find that as well. And just look for my face. I'll usually be in the thumbnail, or you can find it.
Oh yeah,
it's pretty easy to find. So definitely search it up, and thanks again for having me, Chris.
Dude, no, the pleasure is all mine, man. This has been such a great collaboration. I enjoyed being able to interact with your viewers and have them hear my story about the great Thunderbird, and all of that. You guys got to check that out. So we'll be putting links galore in this. I might actually go ahead and make this. Well, I'll have to think about it, whether it's going to be 16th in the series or if it's going to be a side series of interviews. I don't really have anything lined up. I'm not in the process of starting a show yet.
Yeah.
I probably might just add this is just the next video in my series, to be honest with you. It just fits in that well, timing and everything.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be starting to talk on the channel as I go forward here on after the Anunnaki came to Earth, what are the missing gaps in our history from that point on until now? And why do we have all of these different stories and how do they intermix? And it's a lot of guesswork, but these bits and pieces, all of this uh, fits in together. And you can tell I'm into this. Haven't been so long that I'm starting to stumble too. But yeah, going forward, we're going to be looking and exploring and about a lot of stuff. And for those of you that are just tuning into my channel, go back to the first one. In every link in the description, and in the top comment, I always put links to the last video and then the next video. So this being the next video, it'll say next video and it'll say coming soon. And that way you can go from the part of the series that you're at, going back through the videos that way, instead of having to go to my channel and go to the videos list. But you can do that as well. And please, please go check Alex out and his work. Again, let's not forget about Daryl in Poasttown. For those of you looking for something great to support, that is a great venue. But there are many, and you can look up areas that in your community that are paranormal places and just call them up and say, do you know of any places that are paranormal exploration places that are really important to the community that need my help right now?
Yeah.
Preserving that. And anything that you can do to support that kind of stuff, historical stuff, makes you feel good. And it's great so that future explorers can check those sites out too, if they and it also helps keep them preserved so that they could be renovated and even reused again in a time of need. So with that, did you have anything else to add?
Oh no, that's all. I agree with all that.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. This is Christopher Baird, Center Stars channel, our first interview and collaboration on the channel thus far in this new series of 2018, going over Hollow Earth and the possible world history along with other hypotheses. Thank you for tuning in and have a wonderful